Hello and welcome to Purpose Matrix. Today, I want to talk to you about something that has not come naturally to me. If you ask a lot of people, they might say I have it, but it is one of my favorite words. It is one of my favorite topics to talk about, and that word is courage. We have to have courage. I want to remind everyone where courage fits in with the Purpose Matrix and really why the framework works. But the 5 principles of success in the PEACE acronym are purpose, education, association, courage, and example. And really the important thing is here that purpose, education, and association will help you build your courage. And we'll also talk today about how you can build courage and how to do that. The other thing we'll talk about, or a couple other things we'll talk about today is it is really good to have self-awareness to know yourself when you want to build courage. We're going to talk about failure and what that means to you. We're going to talk about your fears and the role that plays when you're thinking about taking action and having courage, and and how your ego fits into that. We're going to talk about how to take the small steps when we're a lot of times we're trying to think of the big thing, but starting small and taking small steps. And then we're going to talk about just focusing on the process and how if we do that and separate from the result, it will help give us courage. And for a lot of us, courage isn't something that you're born with. Maybe you are, maybe you're not, but we're all different. But you, nonetheless, no matter what your level of skill around courage is, because we can build it as a skill, it can be built one decision, one challenge, one action at a time. For me personally, I didn't start with courage. I worked on building it, and I used the framework that we talk about. But I wouldn't call myself naturally courageous. I'm an engineer or kind of a finance analytical person by trade. So I had to build the confidence in a lot of different ways or a lot of different areas to build courage. I had to find the knowledge or the associations, the network, the mentors to help me act upon things, to give me the courage to act. And I had to get the more I got clarity on my purpose or the direction I wanted to go, the more it gave me courage. Starting with why, just as Simon Sinek says, is so important. And when you get clarity on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then educate yourself on that, and then support, build relationships and a support team around you, that can all give you courage. People look at my real estate path and they see me and they probably say, oh, I don't know. They might say he's crazy, or look what he's doing, or he has a lot of courage, or he's making bold moves. And I would say it's really different. I don't see myself that way. First of all, back when when we bought our first house, I started looking at buying our first real estate investment 2 or 3 years. I don't know exactly when, but before we actually pulled the trigger, I analyzed everything. I underwrote a lot of different deals. I was looking at things like, what is the utility cost going to be when it might have been $40 a month or something, and would this force me to go broke? So but once I started to act upon it, then it built momentum around courage and the confidence to continue to act. So, I'm not natural at this, and I really had to build it over time. But I look back now and it's almost ridiculous, right? And if you look back at anything in your life and the first time you tried something or did something, how scary it was, how much fear you had, those first steps a lot of times feel overwhelming, and we don't have the context going into something new that we have when we look back, right? So now that we have context, we chuckle when we say that was ridiculous. And, whether that's real estate or business or health or whatever it might be, the first time we tried something, it was really scary. But then you look back and you're like, okay, I can do that. And that's how you have to think about whatever you're thinking about doing now. Whatever that hard thing is, that challenging thing is, whatever your heart is telling you to do, you need to be thinking about that. Put yourself in your shoes 5 years from now. You're probably going to chuckle at the thoughts you're having or the fears that are holding you back. The next thing I want to talk about is I referenced it, but where courage fits within the Purpose Matrix framework, and just the importance of the more you can get clear on your purpose, what you're doing and why you're doing that. So doing it, the more courage you're going to have to act. So, let's just take health, for example. If you have a clear goal around health and why you're doing it, if that's so you can be more energetic at work, so you can be more energetic with your kids, so you can be in a better mood at home, so you can just, live longer, have a longer health span, not just a longer lifespan. So you're healthier longer. Maybe it's to save medical costs because you're spending a lot on that. Whatever it might be, if you get clarity as to why you're doing something and you're passionate about that, you're going to have the courage to get up earlier and work out, or to get that extra sleep that you need, or to eat a little bit healthier, right? So getting clear, purpose gives direction and it gives you courage. In addition, education builds understanding, and association gives you strength and awareness and additional education to act. If you have an accountability partner, you know you're going to talk to them next week about, I'm going to work out 3 times this week, or I'm going to, walk with my wife 3 times this week, or I'm going to have a one-on-one, just 30 minutes of focus time with that one child this week. And I have someone holding me accountable next week. I'm going to take the action. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to have the courage to step up and, get off the couch or whatever it is to go do the right thing. So purpose, education, and association, those things build courage. And when you combine, the other thing is, when you start to have courage, you start to act, these things all compound and you'll get even more courage. And when you combine them, if you start to act and you have the educational background and the purpose behind it, this is like a snowball rolling down a hill, and it'll build momentum. I love the quote from John Maxwell that when he talks about courage, the actions of men are the best interpreters of their thoughts. And I just talked about this, but if we really get clear on our purpose and we educate ourselves and we focus on positive education or education around business, leadership, faith, family, health, whatever it might be. But if we're doing that, it's like the actions of men are the best interpreters of their thoughts. If we build our thoughts, if we build our mindset, we are going to build our actions from that. So I love that quote from John Maxwell. So the other thing I want to talk about is that we need to know ourselves and who we are. And then we need to train ourselves, train our minds to build courage. So, are you a ready, aim, fire person? So like for me, I'm ready, aim, and then fire, right? I overanalyze. I had to educate myself. I need to have a team around me that helped me act. But maybe you're a fire, aim, ready. Maybe you're just ready to go, ready to fire, and then you'll clean up the mess later, right? So first of all, be self-aware of your kind of personality and your approach and your style when you're thinking about how to build your courage muscle and your courage skill set. Courage is not just mindset, it's muscle memory, and you can train it. One thing I talk about, actually, I'm here real soon. I'm going on a long trip out west with my son, and we're going to do some hikes, some challenging hikes, 14,000 feet. Part of that is like, it's going to be phenomenal. We're going to have a great bonding time. We're going to be with some other great entrepreneurs and their children. So just to be a great connection with other like-minded and growth-minded people. So there's going to be a huge benefit there. But it's also going to be very physically challenging for me and my son, and it's going to build some grit. And we can build courage. We can train ourselves to have more courage. I love the story of, if you're familiar with David Goggins, he's a former Navy SEAL and has written a couple of books that I've read, and it's just fantastic. But Goggins was really overweight and full of excuses when he decided to change his life. He was a exterminator, and he was scrubbing for cockroaches in a restaurant. And he was like, what the heck am I doing? He was 300 pounds and overweight, but he eventually became a Navy SEAL and an ultra marathon runner, and one of the most intense Navy SEALs that ever lived. His mindset is completely next level. What he said his key is that he calloused his mind. He intentionally did extremely hard things every single day. He taught himself to embrace discomfort. He just to choose the painful path, right? To choose the pain of growth. And he did that, and that's how he built his courage muscle. And he said the most important conversations, and this is a reference to kind of the prior thing I mentioned, but the most important conversations you'll ever have are the ones that you have with yourself. And this is all about training your mind to have the courage to act. So, I talked about it at the beginning, or opened up with it, and we can build courage. So knowing your mindset, knowing who you are, knowing your personality is an important first step. And then if you're not where you want to be and you have fear, or fear overtakes you sometimes, do hard things, wake up early, get some things done, do hard workouts, long runs, just create discomfort, create pain, if you will, to help build your grit muscle and your courage. And David Goggins, I think, said it well. So the next thing I want to talk about is the hidden gift of failure. And I think our relationship with failure, how we perceive this, how we approach things is so important, because we need to focus on our actions and what we're doing, not if we're failing in, a worldly way. One analogy I like to use is that when we look at our children, we allow them to fail. And we know that when they're failing at certain things, we kind of chuckle about it sometimes because we just know they're learning. And to them, it's the end of the world if they're struggling with something, struggling through something, but we just chuckle about it, right? Even think about a toddler that's learning to walk. They fail over and over and over again. We don't get caught up in that. We're like, hey, they're getting closer. They're learning. They're growing. Well, if you step back and think really big picture here with me for just a moment, God will let us fail to help us become the best version of ourselves. Like, a lot of times I think, what will God put us through and allow us to go through and fail so that we grow and become the best version of ourselves? And if we think about something that we want to go into as this is a great opportunity to learn, to grow, to build confidence, then you can separate yourself from, but what if it doesn't go right? Or what are people going to think of me? If we think like that, we're thinking of, quote, failures in other people's eyes. Whereas if we don't get the exact worldly result we want, but we took the actions that we needed to and we grew from it, I would call that success, actually, not failure. So I think we need to reframe how we think about failure and success and what that means. One story I like on failure, and actually there's some connection here. It's interesting because in Jesse Itzler's book, Living with a SEAL, that Navy SEAL was David Goggins, who I just talked about, the Navy SEAL, right? Jesse Itzler also married the Spanx founder, Sarah Blakely, who's, sold Spanx for, I think, over $1 billion, and really interesting. Jesse Itzler, I've seen him speak. But anyway, Sarah Blakely, she built this company, Spanx, and was extremely successful. But her dad taught her a critical, I guess, message, or when she was a child. But her dad taught her to fail. And basically what she said is when she was growing up, her dad would ask her every single day, and they'd ask her and her brother, what did you do to fail today? And if they didn't have anything to share, he'd be disappointed. He didn't like that. But he asked them that all the time. And it allowed them to reframe failure to say, okay, I'm trying something and I'm not trying to fail, but I'm trying to do things that quote, failure may be an outcome of those. And that's okay because I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to grow. So we're not trying to fail, but don't be afraid to fail and put yourself in situations where you may fail. That's okay. The other quote that I love, and I like to talk about a lot of great Mark Twain quotes, but around failure is, we worry about what's going to happen and if we will fail. We create all these situations in our head, but I've had a lot of worries in my life, most of which never happened. And, for me, this is the personal story tied to this is, we had built our real estate for some time, but, there was still some maybe inconsistencies or just fears and, financial worries and like, what was my identity going to be? When I was leaving my corporate job to focus on real estate full time, I really just created every single situation, every single worry that I could about what might happen. And I didn't realize that, okay, maybe 2 or 3% of those things happened. I don't even know, but I have time to figure things out. I had time to solve things. I was caught up in the future and I didn't need to be. So, his quote was very, very accurate for me, and I can connect with that. So I'd ask you the question, what are you worried about in your life? What are you thinking about over and over again? Are you creating a bunch of issues in your life? Are you creating a bunch of stories in your head about potential failures, about worldly failures? And then the next thing I'll talk about is that we can't let ego define our failure, right? Failure isn't what people think about you. If you're worried about what people think, that's your ego talking. Even financial failure or whatever it might be, are we really worried about what's going to happen in like the worst case scenario? Or are we going to starve? Are we going to not have a house? Or are we worried about what people are going to think if we don't have this, societal presentation of ourselves that we think we should have or whatever it might be, right? Is it your ego talking or is it true failure? And I think the important thing is like, the next thing I'll talk about is judgment and the tie of judgment to ego is if I'm judging myself or evaluating everything I might be doing right or wrong, I'm also probably judging others. And, part of when we get consumed in worry, ego and worried about what other people think, it's because maybe we're judging ourselves too much, or maybe we're judging other people too much. So there's a connection between ego and judgment, in my opinion, as well. And if we can let go of judgment, which I'm not saying I have this figured out, by the way, but if you have someone that's, crossed you or whatever it might be, and you're judging them, or you think other people should be doing something different, you're also probably critical of yourself. And you're also then probably very fearful or worried about what if other people are judging you. So I've had a couple examples of some things. And when I work on not judging others as much, that's when I have more freedom out of that. The story I'll tell here around just in general, not letting your ego define you. And really the discussion I had with Rob Dubay, who wrote the book Shine with Gino Wickman, is, are we letting are we leading with our heart, or are we leading with our mind? Right. So when I launched the podcast the first time, I had all kinds of fears of what other people would think of me. Do I belong? Have I deserved the platform to have a podcast? Do I have a good message? Do I have a story to tell? Can I help people? Am I doing this for the right reasons, or am I doing it for the wrong reasons? And a lot of these questions were fear-based and ego-based. I was worried about what other people were going to think of me. And I still think of it. I mean, to be completely transparent, I still were like, am I doing this? What do people think? Like, I bet this person or that person thinks that's ridiculous, whatever it might be. But that's my ego talking. And we all have that. We all have a challenge with that. But just really get down to the bottom of your fears and what they are, and understand what is the true worst case scenario. And see if it's at the core of it, is it ego or is it real, basically? The other thing that really got me over the edge when I was thinking about this podcast launch is the sign that I have on my wall right over here. If you see on YouTube, you can see me pointing to it. You can't see the sign, but it's Teddy Roosevelt's quote, "The man in the arena." And I absolutely love this quote. And I love it because not just because it's meaningful and like it just resonates with me, but because Teddy Roosevelt, he didn't just say it, he lived it, and I'll tell you why. But the quote is this: "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who errs, who comes short again and again, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." And I have that sign exactly as I just read it on my wall. And I love it because Teddy Roosevelt, he wasn't just a great president, or he wasn't just a great speaker. He lived it. He lived in the arena. As a young child, he was sickly and weak, and doctors told him they didn't think he'd live long. But his father basically helped him build his mindset and told him, you have the right mindset. You have the mind, but you haven't got the body. You must make your body. And it's interesting because our mind can control so much if we are working to control our mind. And he did it. Roosevelt did it. He worked on exercise, adventure, just a ton of effort put into it. He lived with boldness, with grit, with courage, and, just in so many different ways throughout his life, whether that's with troops in battle or speaking truth. He didn't just write the quote that I just talked about. He truly lived it. And I just appreciate that. And I remember thinking about, am I going to do this episode? And honestly, I recorded the first episode 2 months or so before it was released. And I just remember recording it and thinking, okay, I survived. Once I hit that step of just recording it, not even releasing it, so no one could listen to it and judge or anything. Once I did that, I was like, okay, yeah, that wasn't so bad. Like, I can do this. I can talk in front of a microphone or ask questions. And, I was like, okay, here we go. Let's do it. So the next message I want to talk about on courage is that, and you may have heard me talk about this before, but I love it. And it's Steve Jobs. You can't connect the dots forward, but you have to start. Our brain is wired to predict the worst case scenarios, to create all the problems, like Mark Twain said, that are in our head, all the worries that we have in our head. And we just have to be aware of that. Like, we have to be aware that our brains we're humans. Our brains were created for survival mode. The cavemen were created to survive and protect and defend and think about all the worst case scenarios. But what we have to understand is that first, the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. So let's let the mind be a servant, but not let the mind be the master. Let's recognize it, separate ourselves from it, which seems hard and crazy. But the book, by the way, I reference this book other times, but the book Power of Now, which is a deep book, but it really talks about how we be in the present moment and try to separate from our mind, but use our mind as a servant. Anyway, when we're thinking about doing things and we're thinking about, making a move or doing it, having a tough discussion or being a good example to somebody, we have to think about the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, because our mind is automatically oftentimes telling us about the worst case scenario. These are all the things that are going to go wrong. You're not worthy. You can't do this. Whatever it might be. Our mind is wired to protect, defend ourselves and others, quite frankly. And we just have to know that, but also we have to train our mind to understand the best case scenario. So I talked about, all the lead up it took to buy that first property. What ultimately got me over it is I went through the exercise to think through best case scenario and a worst case scenario on that first property. And the worst case scenario I thought was, okay, I might, negative cash flow, a couple $100 a month, or maybe I'll something will happen, someone will trip and fall and I'll get sued and lose, thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars, maybe, I don't know. But I thought maybe I'd lose $10,000, but like worst case scenario, market might change, market might crash, all these things. I don't know how to do it. Real estate doesn't work, whatever it might be. Best case scenario, I thought, okay, I could cash flow $200, maybe $300 a month on this property. That would be fantastic. Or maybe over time, the market will grow by 4 or 5%. And, I'll make $10,000 or $15,000 over 3, 5, 10 years, whatever it might be. And that's what I thought the best case scenario was. But when we think about best case and worst case, we can only articulate in our minds like the almost tactical best case scenario. But the reality is the best case scenario was once I did that, it gave me the confidence. I had better understanding, like everything I had studied, it all of a sudden clicked. It all of a sudden made sense. I had better understanding and I built a confidence, I built a momentum, and it just generated more and more action and the snowball effect. And then I bought another property 4 months later and another property 4 months later. And it kept going. And then I started buying apartments. And then all of a sudden I'm here. If I didn't take that action ever, I would never be talking to you right now. It wouldn't have stacked up this way. Or maybe God had a plan. There'd been a different path, but nonetheless, I wouldn't be here. It would have taken a different form. You can't connect the dots forward. You can't comprehend all the good things that will happen and the compound growth that your mind, your confidence has from taking those first steps. So courage leads to confidence and confidence leads to additional clarity. So take those first steps, do those hard things. And I'm going to talk about that more here in a second. But if you feel fear, like I did, whether that's the podcast, launching that, or whether it's buying our first house, it's often a really good sign that you're thinking about a lot, that your heart's probably in that direction, and you need to move in that direction. Craig Rochelle, who has a great leadership podcast, we did a recent company leadership study on him. So we do this once a month, where someone will pick a topic or a video, and we'll bring in lunch, and then we'll all watch it and report out on kind of what our takeaways from it, what we learned from it. But he says, do the hard right thing. And what he means by that is there's an easy thing and a hard thing. There's a right thing and there's a wrong thing. And usually your best way to figure out what the right thing is by it's the hard thing, right? If you have what you think is an easy or a hard decision, you need to make the hard decision because it's the right decision. So do the hard right. And if that's something around your health, if that's something around your family, if that's something around your faith, your business, your leadership, your team, whatever that looks like, there's hard decisions you need to make. You need to make those decisions because you and I both know those are the right decisions. So have the courage to make the tough decisions. By the way, if you're a leader, your team also knows what those hard decisions are and that they're the right decisions. And they're counting on you to make those right decisions. So do the hard right. One of the earliest books, like when I get into self-development that I read, was the book called The Magic of Thinking Big. Don't wait until conditions are perfect. They never will be. Act. Another one, our fears point us in the right direction of the right thing to do. That's from Courage It's Calling by Ryan Holiday. So Ryan Holiday wrote an entire book on this topic. So if you're interested in this topic, check out his book. But it said, our fears point us in the right direction of the right thing to do. Just like the hard right, same concept from Craig Rochelle and Ryan Holiday. And I just encourage you, if you're struggling with something and you think you should do something, you're probably right. You need to do that thing. And the last thing I'll come back to is we have to have the courage to disconnect from the outcomes. I referenced this a little bit, but just understanding what we own and what we don't own. And like what we own is who we are and the actions we take. It is not the successes we have, the external results that everybody sees. Those are outcomes, societal outcomes. We need to focus on who we are, who we're becoming, the actions we're taking. You are not your outcomes. You are your thoughts, your actions, and your faith. That's who you are. So let's control our thoughts, our actions. Let's have good inputs to that to control our thoughts. And then let's take the right actions. Let's do the hard things that we feel compelled to do. The world rewards outcomes, but we can't focus on that. We have to, if we do the right things, the outcomes are feedback, but we have to focus on what we're doing. Courage through faith gives us inner peace regardless of results too. So the other thing is okay, what are my God-given abilities? What can I do? What does God want me to do? If you go do that, who cares what the worldly or societal outcome is, right? So that should give you inner peace and strength and courage to act. And I'll close with this. I want to have courage. I want to go pursue the things that I think, I want to pursue my purpose. I want to educate and associate with others on that. And most importantly, I want to have the courage to do those things. I want to have the courage to be a good leader, to be an example. And because one of my favorite quotes from Paul in 2 Timothy chapter 4, I want to be able to say this: I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. I want to be able to say that. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. What does that mean for you? What does the fight mean for you? What do you feel really strongly about? What is the race for you? Not like a race to the top or a race for, what is the race for you? And getting clear on that is really, really, really important. And finally, and of course, keep the faith. Be courageous in your faith. Be bold. People want that. People are looking for that. Your team is looking for that. Wherever that is, be as courageous as your organization will allow with your faith. But I love that so much. And I think if I have courage and I act throughout my life, then hopefully I can say that at the end of my life, because that's really what I want to be able to say. So I appreciate, again, as I said, this is a topic that I absolutely love to talk about because it has not come natural to me. And I've been working on myself and working on this for a very, very long time. So hopefully this was helpful to you. I, again, appreciate all of our listeners, all the feedback. When I get feedback, it gives me more encouragement. It encourages me. It gives me the courage to do more, to look for better guests, to have more of an impact, to talk boldly like hopefully I'm talking today to you. Share with a friend, family member, like it, give us a review, whatever it is, whatever platform you're on. We just appreciate it. Thanks so much. For the Purpose Matrix, signing off.